grew up in Altadena. I remember at age 9 or 10, my best friend and I decided we were going to climb up Mount Low. We got up there, we took pictures of one another, looking down through the San Gabriel Valley. You couldn't see a thing. It was not a fog bank, it was a smog bank. And today, absolute clarity. Now we're still challenged air-wise, but we have come so far, and it's frankly because people raise the alarm, we pass laws, we have emission standards, we've done so much in this area to make it much healthier than it ever was.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. I roamed and I rambled.
In 1965, Edmund G. Pat Brown was governor of California. Lyndon Johnson was president of the United States. With this backdrop, Bay Area activists Helen Reynolds and Bill Evers, both Republicans, founded the Planning and Conservation League. Their dual goal was to create a full-time environmental lobbying presence in Sacramento and to provide a voice for environmental organizations around the state.
We were with Ed Seaberg, and that's Helen Reynolds and myself. At that moment, I was president of the Roadside Council, I believe. And Seaberg, who was a terrific guy, he said, you environmentalists don't get it. You just come up here when there's a problem. And you ought to have a continuing presence. So driving back, Helen and I discussed it and said, yeah, let's form. And it's funny, in those days, it was fashionable to name your organization after what you actually did. And so we call it the Planning and Conservation League.
I call up Bill and he's starting PCL, and so I sign up and we have these weekly meetings. It actually was really a lot of fun.
Prior to teaming up with Bill Evers, Helen Reynolds was a leading advocate against the proliferation of billboards. Her conservation interests, however, extended well beyond this subject.
She was one of those extraordinary women, like Mrs. Livermore, who just were going to do stuff even though the men treated them like dirt.
At the time of its inception, PCL had no Southern California representatives.
So you were the first president of the organization?
Oh boy, was I. And you guys in Southern California, holy smoke, were you difficult. Now, down there, all they wanted was more development. It just was a nightmare.
The joining of the North and South of California through PCL occurred through the addition of Dave Hirsch, a Southern California attorney and activist.
And I, at the time, was the president of something called Stamp Out Smog. I wrote, I think, to Lou Butler, and he invited me to San Francisco to one of their meetings.
I mean, he was like a pillar of light.
In 1972, PCL created the PCL Foundation to conduct research and develop problem-solving educational materials. Then, in 1973, PCL hired its first full-time executive director, Bill Press.
Bill came aboard, and then we really took off like lightning.
By the mid-1970s, multiple bipartisan efforts led by PCL culminated in the adoption of several milestone environmental laws, including the 1970 California Environmental Quality Act, the 1972 Coastal Conservation Initiative and Coastal Zone Management Act, the 1973 Clean Water Bond Act, the 1973 Wild Rivers Bill, and the 1974 Warren Bill, which created the State Energy Commission. During that time, Bill Press also worked alongside PCL's third president, Richard Wilson, and was recognized as one of Sacramento's most influential lobbyists in 1974 by the California Journal. With the election of Governor Jerry Brown in 1975, PCL and the state were fortunate to have a governor with solid commitments to protecting the environment. In contrast, and during the tenure of Governor Deukmejian, PCL was very busy as his administration was generally not friendly to the conservation agenda.
California finally has a truly anti-environmental governor, which was really unique because Reagan was not anti-environmental, neither was Pat Brown or Jerry Brown, but Deukmejian clearly was.
With the help of then Democratic majorities in both houses, PCL helped pass a variety of legislation.
We worked on some major legislation, stopping oil spills, one of the major oil spill prevention laws in the country. We helped promote recycling. California is now the model nationally in terms of recycling. Part of the reason why we have pickups in front of our houses, we have so many great recycling programs. We helped defend the Bay Delta from 2 massive water projects proposed by Governor Deukmejian. We did the usual of saving CEQA, which happens every few years. We had several of those bouts in the 1980s as well. We did several ballot measures. Many of the trains that take people from Los Angeles to San Diego or from Sacramento to the Bay Area are because of PCL's Proposition 116 rail bond. We passed the Mountain Lion Protection Act that helped save not only mountain lions, but also put about $1 billion into protecting key natural lands.
I first heard about the Planning and Conservation League when Jerry Merrill asked me if I would come run the Mountain Lion Initiative. Up to that point, I had only done candidate campaigns, and I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I admit I'd never heard of PCL, and I sure as hell didn't know people shot mountain lions for fun, but, you know. We had talked about, in the course of the campaign, saving mountain lions. And so once it passed, people thought, oh, well, we've saved them. And we realized we'd oversold the case, that we hadn't made it clear there was a great deal more that would have to happen after that. That was step one.
The regular presence of mountain lions is an indication of a healthy ecosystem. It means that there is plenty of food around.
The legislature put a measure on the ballot to overturn Prop 117. And so I got back involved with it. And I think it was at that point I realized how really long-term these issues are.
The initiative banned the hunting of all mountain lions. Successful initiatives in 1988 and 1990 provided more than $20 billion for parks, wildlife, and public transportation.
Perhaps the most important thing we did from a public health perspective was the Proposition 99 Tobacco Tax Initiative in 1988. That was back at the time where tobacco was king. They were so powerful that when we took the bill to the Assembly Revenue and Taxation Committee, not one member of the committee would even move to have a vote on the bill. But we were prepared for that, and we announced the initiative the next day. It was a great coalition that was started by Planning and Conservation League and the American Lung Association. Both Jerry Merrill came up with the idea, along with Kurt Neckomson from the American Lung Association, who incidentally was a former PCL executive director. We built a coalition working with Democrat Assemblyman Lloyd Connolly, Republican Assemblyman Bill Falante, the Medical Association, the hospitals, and Cancer Society and Heart Association were all part of the coalition we helped build. And that measure saved more lives than any other ballot measure probably ever passed on a state ballot in the entire nation.
When Pete Wilson, who was the savior of the Tuolumne River and the California Wilderness Bill and so on in the Senate, came in, we thought, well, that era is over. We're going to have somebody positive. He appointed Doug Wheeler and Michael Mantell and Richard Wilson and all these good people. And it was actually much worse than Deukmejian. He wouldn't sign good bills. He didn't have his own environmental programs. And it was a pretty miserable 8 years with Pete Wilson.
PCL has always taken pride in the capabilities and dedication of its staff and allies over the years. Executive Director Jerry Merrill is widely recognized as one of the most creative and effective staffers ever to work at PCL.
Jerry Merrill is a legend, a justifiable legend, and he is a legend because way back when he started with PCL, he decided that this organization is going to lead the state in allocating its assets, its resources, i.e. the money of the people of the state of California, in ways that make a visible, significant, major commitment to conservation. And his work on the initiatives, he made John Burton and others mad. He made everybody mad because he figured out, hey, people do things and support things and vote for things because they think it's going to be good for them. So let's get the people who are going to benefit from conservation at the local level to get together, raise the resources to pass statewide initiatives that will make all the difference locally and on a statewide basis. And he's a genius, right?
PCL enjoyed the benefits of having a spokesperson for many years in actor Jack Lemmon. Conferences, symposiums, and river trips were all highlights over the years. PCL's annual symposiums have been must-attend events for the environmental community for decades. The opportunity to get together with legislators, executive branch leaders, and governors has always been a special part of the PCL experience.
Gray Davis was fine and, certainly was positive, but ran into a lot of problems in the energy crisis. And when Arnold came in, we had no idea, but he turned out to be pretty good too.
By the early 2000s, PCL had been a major participant in virtually every significant environmental victory in California over a 35-year time period. Working with legislative leader Byron Scher was key to this success.
But Byron was the total conscience of the legislature in terms of the environment, and particularly the California Environmental Quality Act. And one of my greatest thrills was testifying before Byron's committee, and I got to testify at length on CEQA, and I still have the video of that because it was such an important time for me to be able to talk with the chair of the committee, Senate Natural Resources, I believe, asking about CEQA and standing up for CEQA on behalf of PCL. Byron was able to get people you wouldn't think would support environmental protection to do it. And he did it purely on the integrity, his own personal integrity, and the integrity of the positions he took. Because, of course, as anybody who knows about CEQA knows, the California Environmental Quality Act is the best way to let the public get its views into the decision-making process. It doesn't take power away from elected officials at all, but it makes them have to listen to genuine concerns that they may never have found out about. And Byron really was able, I think, to convey the message to his colleagues on both sides of every aisle that this was the essence of good government and the essence of what we needed to do as a state to protect our greatest assets. And I'm just so happy to have been alive and to have been associated with Byron Scher.
In addition to its work in the legislature, PCL continued its education and outreach programs, like workshops, to energize and empower activists throughout the state.
I think our first big out-of-town workshop was in Sutter Creek. 1/3 of it was, my typical environmental friends in Amador County. The other was an amazing number of appointed and elected officials who signed up for this workshop. And then there was the pro-mining crowd. And I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to be lynched. This is just going to go crazy because I've really got what amounts to it. The whole focus will be about this mining project when we really just want to talk about CEQA. So I ran down to Mark Delaverne's office. I said, Mark, we're going to change the format at the start of this whole thing. We're going to put an American flag up on the wall, and we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're going to sing America the Beautiful along with This Land Is Your Land. That's what we're going to do. And Mark thought it was crazy. He was really nervous. He thought, oh, Bill, God, we can't. And I said, no, we're going to do this. And so I introduced myself, and I said, first thing I'd like to do is do the Pledge of Allegiance, and it was like, really? But we did it, and it was fine. And then, we sang America the Beautiful, which led in really nicely to a segue about, how we all care about so many places in America. And so we got through this thing, and then pretty soon everybody again was active. They were involved. And then I could start talking about what's CEQA's purpose, about avoiding environmental harm, and ways to reduce or avoid environmental harm and not have the focus be on this mine. And I remember at the end of the thing, Mark called me up to me and says, I can't believe that we pulled that off.
The Community Guide to CEQA, created by William Yates, has been foundational to the workshops that are presented by PCL throughout the state. Another notable publication put together by then Interim Executive Director Karen Douglas was Everyday Heroes, a compilation of CEQA's success stories in California.
And CEQA is such an important tool for the citizenry to assure governmental transparency and decision-making, accountability, and it's really a democratic mechanism to insert yourself into the decision-making process.
Parallel to its lobbying and educational efforts, PCL has pursued a number of major litigation efforts related to water and to the protection of CEQA. In 2000, PCL won precedent-setting litigation against the Department of Water Resources on the subject of paper water. It started when PCL's then General Counsel Gary Patton reached out to attorney Tony Rossman.
He really wanted PCL to bring this litigation. Well, the case wound up taking more like 6 years instead of 6 months. And so we had to go up on appeal. The Supreme Court unanimously decided not to hear that case. And I think the most immediate benign outcome from that was giving Randy Knaus that boost he needed to get the 2 bills out of the legislature that now require major development in California to prove up an availability of water before new land use entitlements are issued. Because what the court did was say that the emperor has no clothes. And no one else was willing to say that.
In recent years, PCL has continued its lobbying, litigation, and coalition building efforts to pursue a number of special, location-specific environmental projects. In May 2008, PCL worked with a number of other environmental organizations in negotiating and executing a milestone agreement with the Tejon Ranch Company, preserving almost 90% of the existing 270,000 acres of Tejon Ranch in the Tehachapi Mountains. The acreage is a critical linkage resource between the coast and transverse ranges, which supports an abundance of species. Today, PCL remains an advocate for this critical habitat.
By far the most challenging project that I got involved with was in Monterey County, and that concerned the Carmel River. The problem of 2 million cubic yards of mud stuck behind the San Clemente Dam, which was seismically weak and which threatened the viability and the lives and structures of the Carmel Valley. We forged a model between the private and the public interests in creating a path forward. Now we've restored the river. There are 25 miles of additional rearing habitat, spawning habitat for the fish. The people of the Carmel Valley now have a river that's functioning more naturally. PCL was determined to help support and lead an effort, and they did.
Recently, PCL has initiated litigation against the Metropolitan Water District's efforts to acquire land as part of a premature initiation of the Twin Tunnels project. Seen here is the outline of the lands MWD would like to use for the Twin Tunnels project.
The Planning Conservation League will continue to join with farmers, environmentalists, fishing interests, taxpayer groups in our opposition to the project at every venue. And we think we're doing pretty well. But more importantly will be what happens after the tunnels fade away. And how do we move to a much more sustainable ecosystem approach? One that interestingly combines not only our water side, but some of the energy components.
In the spring of 2016, Governor Brown came forward with what was called a Build by Right measure, offering essentially a CEQA exemption to residential projects with 5 to 10% affordable housing components.
And I thought PCL took a really interesting and, again, strategic approach of how do we bring groups together that have been involved in affordable housing, that have been involved in environmental justice, that have been involved in environmental review, and figure out how do we create a proposal that actually meets the need by floating a 100% affordable housing goal. And I think that kind of win-win approach that PCL takes in terms of talking to groups and bringing groups to the table was really effective this legislative session and bodes well for the future.
Moving forward, PCL will continue to use a full array of coalition-building tools and strategies to protect the people and environment in the state of California.
Just this morning, my wife said to me, am I going to have to use a bucket to get the cold water out of the pipes in the shower for the rest of my life? And, I think the answer is, yeah, probably so.
How do we deal with global warming? How do we deal with issues that are bigger than any individual, any state, and arguably any nation?
No developed nation in the world has gone through a growth phase like California has done since World War II. Now, the question is, how do we adapt to that growth phase?
Well, to start with, to take a big picture look at the housing and land use issue to start with, is the elephant in the room is the balance between economic growth and resource management. And we have always, as a society, felt, and especially in the state of California, which is a fast-growing economy, that growth is always good. Growth is good if you plan for growth.
In the last 8 years, something like 30,000 people have moved into downtown Los Angeles. That is a phenomenal change. And that's an exact model of the kind of activity that we'd like to see in California communities. And we need to redirect those sprawl resources into infill areas more so that we can build better communities in California.
The key politically is to have this marriage of environmental and equity concerns, but also the key in terms of the substantive policy is really how do you deal with anti-displacement, affordable housing, transportation, mobility issues, access to services and jobs, which is all about doing the right kinds of infill in the right places without displacing people and gentrifying their neighborhoods and so you have to marry them both from a substantive policy perspective to make it work, and conveniently enough, politically you have to marry them because it's the only way you're going to be able to change the politics in the building.
What is new is our approach is that we're looking at it as an economic benefit to grow up as opposed to out, and not just an environmental benefit. We're looking at it as a social benefit because it allows low-income families to live without automobiles, for example, as opposed to just an environmental benefit. So we're taking a different perspective. We're going to be communicating about it in a different way, we expect, and we're hoping we're going to get some new allies as a result.
PCL will continue to scrutinize and comment upon proposed water projects in the state, just as it has been intensively involved in water policy for decades.
PCL was really ahead of the game in terms of saying we have to conserve water. Now everybody recognizes it as a result of climate change.
In the future, I look forward to it being managed in a much more sustainable way, an enriching way, not just as good things, but rather as integral to our society and to our economy.
PCL now has a stature in the water world that is as good as any institutions in the state. And so we have to keep active in that area.
I think PCL's role is going to be increasingly important to bring together all the affected players in California.
There are dozens, hundreds of groups around the state that care about these issues.
Coalitions in today's political arena are one of the most important aspects you can have to get your voice heard. As we move forward for the next 50 years, we need to continue to focus on how we build that strong coalition for any of the work that PCL does. And at the same time, we become members of other people's coalitions to help them bring their voice forward as well. When I've had conversations with the private businesses, especially in Silicon Valley or the Bay Area, housing is one of the big ones. So we need to reach out to the private sector to see how they can participate, what they need out of this process, and to bring them to the negotiating table, because they're the job creators.
Our efforts to protect the environment and build more sustainable communities throughout California will continue to be facilitated by the California Environmental Quality Act.
I think of PCL as an organization that has, over the years, been the principal custodian of the state's Environmental Quality Act.
PCL, through a former board member, William Yates, did a wonderful community guide to CEQA. We've just in the process of doing a major update to the guide and bringing it current with the issues that we're facing, including climate change, and with the changes in the law over the last several years.
Our board of directors is very lucky to have a very active and dedicated legislative committee which reviews all proposed CEQA legislation in Sacramento. We will continue to monitor what is basically a relentless stream of proposals to weaken the law as we go forward. And we look forward to working with all stakeholders moving forward in terms of looking at opportunities to make the law better and more efficient.
There are so many people and places that we all love in California, and to protect them is our prime directive at PCL, a directive that becomes increasingly difficult by the day as we face climate change, a problem that is sure to bring many more unexpected and profoundly difficult consequences.
The diversity of the problem demands a diversity of solutions. I'm on the ground, I'm in the communities, and yet now I have the ability to reach into these dialogues through Planning Conservation League and the board of the foundation as well, to find new ideas, find places where the opportunity is ripe, the solution is happening, but these communities aren't aware, and we can help bring them into that process, help to bring their voice into that process, and do the best we can do.
PCL's mission for the next 50 years is to build the broadest possible coalitions, reaching out to all stakeholders and creatively addressing the critical challenges we all face.
And a sustainable California is going to mean all of us showing up, participating, making compromises, and taking the lead. I see and hope for PCL that in the next 50 years, we will be at the forefront of what California will look like for the next 50 years.
But we're not satisfied. We never will be satisfied. We're always going to be working as hard as we can to find the next best step forward.